What's up, guys? Music fan here, and as you can tell, I'm wearing black, and that's mostly because today we are continuing the Metallica discography review with AF for my glasses, with a review of Metallica's fifth studio album, Metallica, or simply known to everyone else as the Black Album, released in 1991. So let's get quickly going with this album review. 1990 around 1990 Metallica starts producing their next album with the producer Bob Rock, who is mostly known for producing Aerosmith, Motley Crue, Bon Jovi of all people, of all bands, and pretty much even after creating such an ultra complicated, uncompromising, and very tough visceral record like Injustice for All, they kind of thought that the ultra complications and the complexity was just far too much of them to replicate live. So they opt this time around they opted more for a more streamlined, more packaged, more simplistic, and more immediate sound with this album. And the songs really do prove in the sense that they do go for that simplicity. They do go for that immediacy with this album. And that's what definitely sounds like with the music here of this album. Songwriting wise, it gets a little more personal here. It's clearly a departure from the ultra complicated, ultra fast sound of Justice, and this particular album, you know, is a lot more personal. It's much more personal with more personal themes of like regret and loss, and still they still kind of retain the anger, the visceral anger that they were so much known for. But this time around, it's far more maverick. It's less inclined to Egyptian pharaohs, monsters, or even with the Justice album, political awareness, and it's more towards more personal themes or even themes of wandering and like rovering maverick, for instance. That's what it kind of feels like with the lyrics of this album. Also a little more personal with songs like The Unforgiven, and also Nothing Else Matters, like a ballad that's clearly a step away from most of the other few ballads that Metallica produced in the 80s, but it's clearly a much more personal, more accessible record than all their past works. So just let's get quickly going through a track by track review. If I can pull out the album here. First song, Enter Sandman, the single that really caught Metallica into the mainstream, and really has like the nice catchy riff, and Lars's catchy drumming here, and also James Hetfield's vocals here, like amidst his very ominous feel towards his vocal, and like, yeah, pretty catchy single. Also, one of the first few Metallica videos I saw that exposed me to Metallica, and Sad but True, also very ominous type of song. Also, kind of aided by Bob Rock's very clean, crisp production, as opposed to the arid, gritty sound of Justice. And Sad but True, yeah, also very ominous type of song. Holier Than Thou. It's a pretty good song. I definitely like it. I like how this song has a bit of a groove behind the performance, behind the playing, than as opposed to Justice, where it has like these ultra complicated, complex layering. This one is far more streamlined, is far more accessible. Um, the Unforgiven, like I said, very, very personal song, kind of has like a very like not mariachi, but it kind of has like a very Western feel to it. But it's very, very downtrodden type of, very downcasted type of um, Western feel to it, and it's just really ultra dark. It's not nearly as dark as other Metallica ballads, but it definitely has a more weighty subject matter. And Kirk Hammett's solo really complements this song very perfectly. Whenever I May Roam, Also, another good song here has this really loud clicking sound when you listen to the song. I think I believe it might be Jason Newsted's. I think it was playing like a cello bass, and I think it's probably the string hitting against the fretboard. But I digress. Like I mean, maybe I could be wrong. But also one of the singles released along with Enter Sandman, and yeah, pretty good single. Don't Tread on Me. This one has like really has like a bouncy kind of still headbanging, but a bouncy kind of feel to it. This whole record is much more bouncier. It's much more has much more emphasis on groove and accessibility than as opposed to like the thrash speed metal of the 80s work, especially the Justice album. It's definitely much more accessible this time around than previous albums. Through the Never, like another good one here. I think part of the backlash against this album is the fact that there are far that it seems like more of a calculated singles album with a bunch of filler tracks. And not, I can probably like somewhat agree with that assertion. This song, while it's very catchy and it's really, nod bobbing your head type of song, it really doesn't offer anything much apart from the singles that were released. And yeah, it's a good song, but it's like it's not necessarily filler for me, but it's kind of a bit meh for me. Nothing else matters. Another single, like the other ballad on this album. And like imaginary wise, you wouldn't think that a slow ballad song with a metal band backed by a string orchestra, you wouldn't think that that would particularly work. But surprisingly, it really does work with this song. It's Metallica's first ever example of a love song, something that's not noted of them in the 80s in their thrash speed metal work, but it's one that really works, and it's probably my favorite song off the whole album. Um, of Wolf and Man, this one has a very interesting riff thing going on here in the beginning. It's really interesting, really cool, and sorry, my throat's kind of getting dry, like the Justice album. But anyways, this is a really cool song. It has like a really intense, very ominous feel to them. Like it's as if kind of like you're in the dark woods by yourself, and it's like shape shifting into a wolf. But that's that song. The God That Failed. This is another very weighty subject matter. As you guys know, James Hetfield's mother died when James was, I think, like 14 or 16. I don't remember. But he died when James was very young, because of her Christian Science beliefs, and there's her refusal to have any scientific medicine in regards to save her life, and ended up dying of her disease, and which really kind of led James Hetfield to become very bitter and angry, as anybody would, particularly at her mother's death of the Christian beliefs. And the song is really good here. Like James, no, no, Kirk Hammett's guitar solo, is especially pretty top form here. And and as far as the well, I don't know if I'll get to the subject matter. Maybe I'll put like a separate video with my commentaries on that very song, but like probably in later. I'll do that later. My Friend of Misery. Was a bass composition originally made by Jason Newsted. He created the bass line for this song. And I'm not nearly as familiar with this song as I am with the singles, but it's still a pretty good song. And The Struggle Within, the last song off the album, like ends this album on a really good mid-tempo, thrashy type of mode. And the end wraps up the album very nicely. Um, So yeah, let's get to the four point grading system. Hopefully by now you guys know what this means. First point, music originality. It's kind of like a 50-50 for me with the music originality. Like on the one hand, they definitely did needed to take a step back from the ultra complex, um, visceral progressiveness of Justice. They really did need to take a step back from the complexity of it all, But on the other hand, this album also kind of falters in the sense that Metallica tried so hard with Bob Rock to produce a more accessible record, which thereby they end up with like a couple of filler songs as the more hardcore thrasher fans of Metallica's '80s work claim that this record is, and they don't come wrong in that assertion, and that's the only disappointment I have with this album. And so it kind of gets like a 3 out of 5 for music originality. Songwriting on this album, second point, songwriting is good. Like there are moments on this album, especially with the Unforgiven and Nothing Else Matters, and the singles Enter Sandman and um, Whenever I May Roam. Like there are moments where the lyrics work, but because the album takes a much more personal tone lyrically than in the past, then it falters a little bit. So songwriting gets kind of like a 3 out of 5. Likability. Unfortunately, this album gets nothing but the singles for me. The singles are just the only ones that kind of like really gravitate me, or I gravitate towards the singles. And again, I'm not nearly as familiar with the other few songs than most other Metallica fans are. But like, but the likability it's kind of shaky for me. It's kind of a little bit iffy. Um, kind of gets like a kind of a 3.5 out of 5. I listened to this album somewhat, but I only listened to the singles, and I haven't taken enough time to listen to the non-single songs off this record, so it's kind of a halfway point. And as for the album as a package, that's really hard to think because like this album has such a it's kind of like a foreshadowing of the rest of the other work that Metallica will produce in the next decade, the '90s, which really, even for me, doesn't it has its moments in the later albums, but as far as staying power and as far as the overall package of those albums are concerned, this really kind of gives like a bit of a warning sign of what's to come. Much more accessibility, but far less on originality. And this album is not really that bad, but it's not Metallica's best either. It was a commercial success. It was the album that brought Metallica to the mainstream. Like after a decade uh, of underground success, and with this particular album, we now know Metallica. Metallica is now a household name, and the only detraction from that is that it caused a lot of hate, a lot of flack from the thrash metal fans, from their thrash metal fans, and I I kind of feel on the fence with this record. Really, it's one that I enjoy a lot with the singles, but as far as the other songs are concerned, it's not one that really piques my interest, honestly. And it has its good moments, but it really doesn't offer anything for me. This album kind of gets like a halfway 3 out of 5 for the album. It's not the worst thing that Metallica has put out, but it's not necessarily the best either. So yeah, leave your comments in the comment section down below. Tell me what you think, and that's Metallica, the Black Album. Mr. Music Fan, take care, guys.